Hi, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Erik Vermetten from the Netherlands. It's about 8:45 in the Netherlands right now. I'm very happy to moderate or host this part of the conference, and to introduce and to welcome two hotshots, two great pioneers of the field, which is Amanda Fielding and Rick Doblin. Now, I'm very happy that you're with us. Have you had a chance to zoom in over the last couple of days or today, Rick and Amanda, to the conference?
I sadly haven't, no.
Oh,
But
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, have you had a chance to chip in or so?
No, actually, I've been just too busy working, but
Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you how wonderful this conference is going thus far. There's almost no technological glitch, and there's a thousand or 1,100 or 1,200 people chiming in here and there. We've violin concertos. We've got great sessions. Really, I enjoy it, even though I'm here at home. But it feels like I'm a little bit at a real conference. A little bit, but it's good to see you and hear you. So are many other people at this moment in time. This is prime time. It's Saturday evening live. People shut off their TVs and are now watching us. So without further ado, because you have some messages and some pre-recorded talks, and you're with us to do a Q&A after that or so. So in the order in which we just discussed that we're going to do this, it's going to be Rick first, Amanda, and you gracefully agreed that that's okay. And then to be followed by you, Amanda. But let me ask you one question first, if I may, Amanda, because I was looking at how did the name Beckley Foundation emerge? I couldn't find a trace to that. Could you help me clarify that?
I can, because it was called the Foundation to Further Consciousness.
Right, I read that.
And then I thought that sounded not quite right, because I was trying to affect the UN and government. And so I thought Beckley, which is the name of my house, sounds more like Berkeley or Bletchington, or, you know, it sounded more professional. So I chose that name of my house, where I've always lived and still live. Yeah.
It's the name of your house. Lovely. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. We'll hear more from you, but we'll go back to, or we'll start first with Rick. Do you want to introduce yourself the way you want to do that? Because if I would do it, Rick, I would do it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be glad to. I'll say that I've had two parallel tracks of education. One is to become a psychedelic therapist and trained with Stan Grof in the holotropic breath work from 88 to 90. And I first did a workshop with Stan in 1972. And it was reading his book, Realms of the Human Unconscious, Observations from LSD Research. And when I was 18, that got me involved in this whole thing. So that's one strand of education. The other has been public policy. And so that's where I have a master's and PhD from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard in the regulation of the medical use of psychedelics. And I started MAPS 34 years ago, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And our goal is mass mental health. And what that means, and this is why I'm so proud to be on this with Amanda, is that a lot of the psychedelic researchers leave policy aside and they just focus on the science. But as we know, the science and the politics are intimately connected. And so what we're wanting to do, because we're a nonprofit, is obtain approval for prescription use and hopefully get that covered by insurance. But we also want people to be able to access these drugs on their own without going to a doctor, without going through religion. So Amanda has been courageously willing to work with MAPS at certain conferences because we talk about policy and science, whereas other groups have just run away from the policy talks.
Great. Okay. Now, you wanted to start your pre-recorded talk, Rick,
Yeah.
And then it's just trivial, but we know each other since about 4 or 5 years. When you gave a lecture at the American Psychiatric, and you were talking about Jan Bastiaans, and I walked up to you, and 2 weeks later, we met at the ICPR meeting, actually the last one, the 2016 one. And the world's been a different place for me after that, Rick.
And for me too, because I've always wanted to have a foothold in Europe and to bring this, and also Dr. Bastiaans. I mean, he really did the first work ever with psychedelics for PTSD, LSD for concentration camp syndrome. So to see that you were connected to them, that was phenomenal. That was such a great consequence of speaking at the American Psychiatric. I felt like it was, not necessarily friendly territory, going into the den of psychiatrists. But a lot of them are scared about this, but some were not, and more now psychiatrists are open to this. So meeting you there wasn't trivial at all. It was phenomenal.
No, me neither. Here you go. The floor is yours, Rick.
Okay. It's a pleasure to be able to present to you today, along with Amanda, fellow pioneer in psychedelic research. However, I think one of the key pioneers was Stanislav Grof, who started doing LSD research in the 1950s. He wrote, "Psychedelics are the study of the mind, what the microscope is to biology and the telescope is to astronomy." Stan's my mentor. I've studied with him for holotropic breathwork, but it was in 1972, after doing a lot of LSD and mescaline at college and having a difficult time to integrate the experiences, that I went to the guidance counselor at college and I said, "Help me with my psychedelic trips." And not only did the guidance counselor take me seriously, but he handed me a copy of Realms of the Human Unconscious, Observations from LSD Research by Stan Grof. What's amazing is the book wasn't even published until 1975. So I got a manuscript copy. And it was reading that book at this tender age that changed my life and made me decide to devote my life to psychedelics, primarily for political reasons, that I felt that if more people could have the sense of connection and unity, that we would identify as part of the whole. It would be harder to dehumanize others. There would be a difficult time to commit genocide or to completely trash the planet, because we're a part of that as well. And so it was in 1986 that I actually started MAPS, in April of 1986. In December of 2014, we started the MAPS Public Benefit Corp, which is our for-profit arm. And that's mostly the pharmaceutical arm now for MAPS. We have about 100 people, about 2/3 in the Public Benefit Corp, about 1/3 in MAPS. And that we have, the idea is that if we make MDMA into a medicine, the Public Benefit Corp will sell it. Whatever profits we make will go back to the mission of MAPS. So that's our corporate structure. Since our founding, we've raised over $100 million. What's remarkable is that this is all from donations with no strings attached. I mean, some people have made restricted donations, so you could say it's strings, but nobody expects anything back from it. So we can operate for the public benefit, not for profit. My first psychedelic research took place 86 and 87, when I had to do a thesis at New College in order to graduate. And I did a 25-year follow-up in methodological critique to Walter Pankey's Good Friday experiment. Walter was a doctor and a minister and was working with Tim Leary on his PhD at Harvard, and it was looking at whether psychedelics could contribute to a mystical experience. And Walter tragically died in 1971 in a scuba diving accident. His body was never found. He sort of dissolved into the ocean, disappeared into the ocean. I'm convinced that he would have done this follow-up if he would have been alive. And I published it in 1991 in the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology. 1992, after struggling with the FDA for quite a few years since MAPS was started in 86, the FDA approved the first phase 1 dose-response safety study for MDMA in humans, and it was with Dr. Charlie Grove. And so he was also an important pioneer here in psychedelic research. Shortly after that, once I published the results of the Good Friday experiment, I was contacted by a fellow who worked inside the, Michael Forcier, worked inside the Department of Corrections, and he had the results from the Concord prison experiment. And he wanted to know if I wanted to do a follow-up to that. And I did a 35-year follow-up to that and published that in 1998. In 2000, we were able to start the first MDMA PTSD study in Spain. 2 tragically, it was going well. We got a lot of good publicity, but that alerted the Madrid Anti-Drug Authority and some of the NIDA-related researchers who've gone to Spain to tell scare stories about MDMA neurotoxicity, and the research was shut down for political reasons, and we were unable to resume it. But we were able to start in 2000 with Michael Mithofer and I to work towards starting MDMA PTSD research in the United States. So this was really the origins of our effort for FDA, beginning in 2000. In order to bring back the psychedelic renaissance, or to have a psychedelic renaissance, really to solidify it, I thought it was essential that we bury the ghost of Timothy Leary at Harvard. So in the sense, it meant that we had to start psychedelic research at Harvard again, which we were able to do in 2005 for a study with MDMA for cancer patients with anxiety. And it took place at McLean Hospital at Harvard Medical School. Actually, it's only about a half a mile away from my house, too. Very convenient. It was started McLean Hospital in 1811. I'll just mention that many of you, Americans at least, have heard the story, the poem about Mary Had a Little Lamb and how she brought it to school. Mary actually was a real person, and in the 1800s, she worked at McLean Hospital. But that was a key important part about building the psychedelic research. The other part was starting LSD research, which was the quintessential scary psychedelic from the 60s. So we were able to start LSD research for the first time in over 35 years in 2008 in Solothurn, Switzerland. Dr. Peter Gasser was the lead psychiatrist for that. And Dr. Albert Hoffman, one of the things that I'm most proud of, he died in 2008, but he learned about the approval of the study just a few months before he died. His wife, Anita, died a few months before Albert died. They were married for 79 years. And so both of them saw the very beginnings of the new renaissance in psychedelic research and the return to the laboratory of LSD. So I'm very, very proud of that. Throughout this time, though, through the 2000s, we did a series of phase 2 clinical trials for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for chronic treatment-resistant people, studies in the US, Israel, Switzerland, and Canada. And as you can see, we treated 107 people. In November 29th, 2016, we had the end of phase 2 meeting at the FDA, which was presenting all of our phase 2 data and then seeing if we could go to phase 3. And the good news is that the FDA permitted us to move to phase 3. So this was a key turning point. Shortly after that, we negotiated all the designs for phase 3, had special protocol assessment agreement with FDA, and then they granted us breakthrough therapy, August 15th, 2017. So that's really very important designation. It's for the most promising drugs. In 2018, we published a study, MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for social anxiety with adults on the autism spectrum, with, again, Charlie Grove and Alicia Danforth, with excellent results we got there. And in 2020, in March, while our first phase 3 study was well underway, we were able to conduct what's called an interim analysis, where it's a sneak peek at the data, and then you can get either the best news is continue the study unchanged, your hypotheticals that you used for your power calculations, the actuals were meeting the hypotheticals, you didn't need to add anybody, we set it up to have a 90% probability of statistical significance, or you're told to add a bunch more subjects to the study because your actuals are not as good as your hypotheticals. Hypotheticals based on your predictions from phase 2. The worst news you could get is that you need to stop the study for futility. So we got the interim analysis in March 2020. We had the best possible news, which was that we could continue the study unchanged. We had 90% or greater probability of statistical significance with at least a medium effect size, and we didn't need to add any more subjects to the study or incur additional costs. Now, shortly after this, COVID happened, and the FDA then negotiated with us and other sponsors too that had a difficult time continuing to enroll subjects. And we came to an agreement with them that we would end the study early with 90 people instead of 100. A little bit concerning because the more subjects you have, the more likely you are to get statistical significance, but we felt comfortable ending it at 90. And also it would have been difficult under COVID conditions. We had to wait a long time to finish it for 100. Now, we also did negotiate with the European Medicines Agency to bring MDMA to Europe, and we succeeded in the scientific advice meeting in the middle of 2018, and got permission that EMA would accept all of our FDA data, and we only have to do one 70-person phase 3 study in Europe, and these are all the different sites in Europe. We are now starting research, which is phase 2 open label. It's for the training of the therapists. And we're very excited about this possibility. We've raised 2.3 million for Europe. We think we're going to need around 25 million. It'll cost around 75 million or more to make it into a medicine in the FDA. So it's very cost effective to bring MDMA to Europe in terms of the cost to get it approved. Plus there's way more people in Europe than in the US. So we're going to have some fundraising challenges ahead to raise the rest of this money. But the good news is that we're starting very soon to start the final step of training the therapists, is where they work with PTSD patients under supervision. Now, to give you a sense of how successful the psychedelic renaissance has been, this is a chart of scientific publications about psychedelics. And if you can look, there was a little bit of a peak in 1970, around that time in the late 60s. Then it went way down. And then starting around 1992, when the FDA approved research to start up with psychedelics again, it's just been astronomically increasing, so that we're just in incredible shape. We are in the midst of the psychedelic renaissance. And to give you an example of that, Compass Pathways just went public yesterday, and their shares value jumped 71% on once it was initially offered on the NASDAQ. And now Compass Pathways, which is only in phase 2, and we're of course in phase 3, and we will know by the end of October if our first phase 3 study was statistically significant. They're worth almost $1 billion, which is astonishing. Of course, they're doing psilocybin for depression. They're claiming that there's more people that are depressed than have PTSD, which I think is true. But in any case, what this demonstrates is that what we've been able to do is build enormous value at MAPS and the MAPS Public Benefit Corporation, but it's for the public benefit. It's all through donations. It's not through investors. So that's my brief story about the pioneer of psychedelic research, and I can end a few minutes early so that we can have.
Brilliant. Let's leave those questions for after Amanda, that both of you could chime in a Q&A. And may I introduce, because there's already a question embedded into your last 2 slides, Rick. So we'll revisit that. Amanda, if I may give you the floor, and you have a pre-recorded message. Do you want to say something before, or you want to give it a kickstart?
Well, maybe I should put you a little bit in the picture from where I came, which is, I suppose, as a child, a passionate interest in altered states of consciousness. My godfather was a Buddhist monk, and anyway, that was my fascination, high levels of consciousness. And then I actually left school at 16 because the nuns wouldn't let me have books on Buddhism, and went my own way. And I got the top professor in the world, who was someone called Professor Zahner at Oxford, who was the expert on altered states and comparative religions. And he became my tutor for 2 years, and I studied that. Later, in whenever it was, 1965, I first took LSD, but it was in the following year, 1966, that I met and started living and working with a scientist, a Dutch scientist of genius, who was also a doctor, and had hypotheses of how psychedelics affect the cerebral circulation to bring about these states, which enabled one to live on these states and work on them. So then at that point, I realized the immense benefits that these psychedelics had to give to humanity. And when the prohibition came down, it was totally obvious, it was a total disaster. And so I went on studying this and trying to teach it to doctors and scientists for the next 20 years. And then when brain imaging started to develop in the 90s, I realized, gosh, I must get into that, because then I can correlate hypotheses with what's happening in the brain. And so I decided, back in the 70s, I decided the only way forward was with the very best scientific research to undo the taboo and open the doors to psychedelics. So I knew that that is what I was trying to do. So then in the 90s, I decided I'd be much more effective if I was a foundation, not a single female. So I became a foundation, got the top scientists on my advisory board, including Albert Hoffman and Sasha Shulgin and a lot of the other impressive people. And then I started to work. I realized one had to first change global drug policy, because before one would be allowed to do the research. So I made the Beckley Foundation a two-headed organization to tackle the two, if possible, at the same time. And I have to say, it's been a very, very hard and long uphill struggle. And part of what I did was start the Beckley Imperial Research Program. I persuaded Dave Nutt that he should join me in doing psychedelic research. I also, to Albert's joy, started a program in 2005 at Berkeley. We got permission, ethical approval to use LSD and brain imaging, but sadly, the scientist went off and decided to do MDMA halfway through. So that never came to it. So it's all ups and downs, starting collaborations. But now we've done some wonderful work, I think, between us all, and things are definitely changed. So I'm afraid I read my presentation, because I'm so bad at presenting. And anyway, I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Thank you for that overview, because some people may know you. I guess most of the audience may already have heard of you, because that's why you are who you are and the pioneer. And for those who did not yet know you, you gave that nice overview. Now, are we okay that you want to start your pre-recorded part?
Yes.
So we should get started and give the central office. The pictures, the last slides of yours, Rick, were a little bit blurry, so I do hope that the bandwidth, maybe the bandwidth on a Saturday night is overwhelmed or so. Let's see how it comes down.
That would be terrible.
Yeah, let's
Is there anything we can do to improve that?
Oh, lots of people behind our screens are working on that, Amanda, I'm pretty sure. So let's see what they can do in between time.
I wonder if they can do anything in England to help my people, but probably not.
I set up the Beckley Foundation over 20 years ago in order to restart scientific research into psychedelics and to reform global drug policy. I hope my work at the Foundation has played some part in the new psychedelic renaissance, promoting the gradual shift away from the counterproductive prohibitionist views, opening the doors to research and changing the tide of public opinion. We must now keep this positive momentum going. I'm very excited about the next phase of my work at the Beckley Foundation, which will combine exploratory studies into the underlying mechanisms of a wider range of compounds and technologies, with clinical trials investigating their therapeutic efficacy. At the same time, with my son Cosmo, we have set up a company called Beckley Psytech, which is entirely independent from the Beckley Foundation, although it shares its cultural and ethical values. Beckley Psytech is growing from the fertile ground provided by Beckley's research, with the mission of bringing certain compounds to licensed medicines with full availability to those in need. It has, since 1966, been clear to me that psychedelics have many unique benefits to bring to our society, particularly in these times of crisis. In the last year or two, I have set about designing and developing exciting new research programs which aim to integrate into modern medicine as yet underexplored compounds such as LSD, 5-MeO-DMT, and ibogaine, in order to combat three major crises of our time. One, with the Resilience Research Program, we address the vast unmet needs in the current epidemic of mental health disorders, which also propose potential solutions to two other huge challenges of our time: the opioid crisis and the way we manage pain. Two, with the Juvenescence Research Program, it is my aim to address the aging crisis by exploratory investigations into how psychedelics can help treat neurodegenerative illnesses and be used to improve health, cognition, and vitality in aging. And three, and finally, with the Science and Spirituality Research Program, I hope to further explore the synergistic potential of psychedelics and spirituality and gain a better understanding of the role of the mystical experience at the very core of the healing process, as well as shedding light on the nature of consciousness itself. We are now facing an ever-worsening mental health epidemic. Worldwide rates of anxiety, depression, and addiction are on the rise. COVID-19 is exacerbating this mental health crisis due to social isolation, loneliness, fear, stress, grief, and economic downturn. While psychiatry is largely ill-equipped to remedy this situation, psychedelic-assisted therapies are showing great promise to be the next breakthrough in the treatment of mental health issues. They have already been shown to be safe and highly effective in numerous clinical trials, and with both immediate and long-term effects. Over the last decade or more, the Beckley Imperial Psychedelic Research Program has played a pioneering role on this front, with the first modern clinical trial demonstrating the benefits of psilocybin-assisted treatment for treatment-resistant depression. This small, game-changing study is now paving the way for psilocybin to be brought to the market as a licensed treatment for depression. Another breakthrough study, which I waited years to do, was the first brain imaging study investigating some of the mechanisms underlying the effects of LSD, such as the vastly increased connectivity throughout the whole brain. My aim is now to explore and develop a wider range of compounds and psychotherapeutic approaches with a focus on more practical and accessible therapies using both full and smaller doses, and also trialing faster-acting compounds. Our research is now starting to unravel the physiological mechanisms underlying the positive effects of low doses of psychedelic in the treatment of mood, cognition, and other disorders. For example, in our recently published lab-based LSD microdosing study, conducted as part of the Beckley Maastricht research program, we found that a single dose of 20 micrograms of LSD reduced depression scores and enhanced vigor and positive mood as compared with placebo. Importantly, we were also able to pick up physiological changes that may underlie some of the positive benefits that we found. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, is a protein that is in part responsible for regulating the processes of cell birth, cell growth, and cell death in the brain. A deficit in BDNF has been involved in depression, among other conditions, and is now thought to play a key role in the ability of ketamine and other antidepressants to improve depressive symptoms. With our collaborators in Maastricht, we revisited for the first time since the 70s the analgesic potential of sub-hallucinogenic doses of LSD by testing how low doses of LSD may affect the ability of healthy participants to cope with pain. Volunteers were asked to submerge their hands in icy cold water for as long as they could manage. On 20 micrograms of LSD, the overall pain tolerance increased by 20%. Subjects also reported a decrease in the subjective experience of unpleasantness. Importantly, at this dose, the level of psychological and cognitive interference is very mild and would not be expected to interfere too much with normal day-to-day activities. What is also remarkable in our study is that changes in pain tolerance and subjective pain perception induced by 20 micrograms of LSD were comparable in magnitude to those observed after administration of opioids and morphine to healthy volunteers under the same circumstances. Our results therefore suggest that low doses of LSD can constitute a useful pain management treatment option that is not only effective to patients, but is also non-addictive. Following up on these encouraging results, we are now exploring an analgesic potential of low doses of LSD for chronic pain. If you have ever experienced changes in pain management with psychedelics, please will you take time to complete our survey, which you can find on the website of social media. I will now move to mention the second research program, also close to my heart, the Beckley Juvenescence Research Program, which explores the potential use of psychedelics as tools to enhance health, cognition, and well-being in aging, and to promote longevity, and also the possibility of preventing or decreasing the destructive progress of certain degenerative illnesses, such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. By 2050, there will be an estimated 10 billion people on Earth compared to 7.7 billion today, and many of them will be living longer. Longer lives do not necessarily mean healthier lives, with those over 65 more likely to have at least one chronic illness and to require expensive long-term care. There is therefore a great need for solutions to extend the span of healthy and independent living and to enable a more inspired manner of dying, like that which can be brought about by psychedelic-assisted therapy, and which may be further complemented by microdosing in palliative care. Our and other research has started to unravel the astonishing properties of psychedelics as promoters of neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, and also as a powerful anti-inflammatory agent. These properties point towards a range of promising therapeutic applications, particularly regarding to age-related disorders, and also for enhancing well-being and healthy aging. With my wonderful collaborators in Brazil, I've started to explore a variety of applications, including neuroprotective, cognitive boosting and restoration, and longevity. And we're planning to explore many more avenues to improve both living and dying. One of our most striking results came from a translational study using mini brains, animals, and humans. Young animals normally show a preference for new toys, whereas when they become older, they show less interest in novelty, sticking with their old favorites. But when given LSD, they show a renewed interest in the exploration of new toys. The older rats, meanwhile, are more firmly stuck in their old, well-trodden tracks. However, if given LSD for 3 days and, importantly, subsequently exposed to an enriched environment, they too begin to play more with the new toys, like the young rats do, demonstrating the positive effect LSD can have, combined with cognitive stimulation, on exploratory research and learning. We are now about to translate this research to humans. There is much other exciting material in the Beckley's portfolio I'd love to share with you another time, like the opening up of a psychedelic-assisted clinic and research centre in Barcelona, and the setting up of Beckley Labs to provide the highest quality GMP psychedelic compounds for research purposes at the lowest possible cost. In order to advance our knowledge of psychedelics and their therapeutic potential, and to ensure that governments and indeed the public and private sectors are properly informed, it is essential that organisations like ours receive the necessary support to carry out vital research. Philanthropic financial support is essential to enable the Beckley Foundation to fulfil its original mission and to continue pushing the limits of our knowledge by conducting the best possible research and daring to explore new and taboo territories. Thank you for your time. Bye.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you for that brilliant overview. Lovely, wonderful. Yeah, we need to clap or so, but that I'm just here clapping. I think everybody's clapping home. Maybe we can use a couple of minutes or so, because I think 2 or 3 minutes to have a brief Q&A. And if you're able to stick around, we can move after our session to a smaller session where we continue with a chat with the people who are present at our panel. But only 30, I was told, could enter that room. Now, a question that came up that probably is for both of you that I've seen in the Q&A, and also maybe you could chime in first, Rick. How do you think that scientists can best reach out to policymakers? It was a little bit embedded in your last 2 slides. What is your take or your advice? How do we reach policymakers in all the efforts that you have brought about in this field for the last couple of decades?
Well, I guess the first question is, what are we asking policymakers to do? Are we asking them to fund research? Right now, with EMA, European Medicines Agency, and with FDA, there's no policies that block our studies. So we don't really need to reach out to policymakers like in the 70s and 80s during this multiple decades when research was squashed. Right now, the main thing I see from policymakers would be funding for the research. So I think that researchers can sort of speak out to funding agencies. The National Institute of Mental Health has not given us any money. They're saying they're not interested in phase 3. They're only interested in mechanism of action research. And that's not really what we're doing because FDA doesn't require mechanism of action data, just proof of safety and efficacy. So I think the main things that I'm concerned about from regulators are funding and a fair and balanced review of the data, So I think for those researchers, the main thing I think is just to publish your data and try to do a lot of public education. Don't think that just putting it in scientific journals is sufficient. You know, really do the reporters and public education aspect of it as well.
Yes. Hello, guys. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry, but we really have to move on to the next track that's starting in 2 minutes. So I'd very much like to invite everyone to join in the after talk with the link that's posted in the chat.
Please say again how we do that.
Okay.
On top of what Rick was saying, I think it's vital to reschedule psychedelics.
Yes.
And because actually, because they're in Schedule 1, which means extremely dangerous and having no medical advantage, it's infinitely more expensive, difficult, and time-consuming to do research, and most people don't touch it. So please reschedule.
Thank you. I get you. There was an important comment that everybody needed to hear, but now we need to cut and move to the breakout room. Thank you, Joost.
Okay, great. And Rick and Amanda, you've received emails as well as Eric to join the meetup room straight away. So we'd love to see you there. Okay.
Okay. So. Continue there. Thank
Goodbye.
you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for watching.
All right, I'll come to the other, the WHOVA thing.
Yeah.